Hi and welcome. It's been a while, so I wanted to do kind of a follow-up of what I talked about before when I talked about herbivore guys. So just to refresh your memory, it's herbivore guys, this phenomenon in Japan. These typically men who just do not really want to pursue women. They're kind of more comfortable just being at home, staying with their parents or just living on their own and just getting involved in some hobby of theirs, like train spotting or video games or basically whatever. I wanted to say that recently I found a very good example of an herbivore guy, a famous herbivore guy, if you want to see. His name is Naoki Tanaka, or Tanaka Naoki, from Kokoriko, this comedy duo. And if you want to see more of him, go to Batsu Game. It's the no laughing punishment game. It's Warate wa ikenai Batsu Game. It's really really funny. In fact, it's become kind of one of my little obsessions lately. So I'm thinking of doing some fan translations. So if you want to see, I can I can provide some of those. But anyway, he himself, Tanaka, he's just he's that perfect example of that guy who's just he's got very feminine gestures. He's got very kind of dainty gestures in the way he does things. He's not really a risk taker. So just really quickly, Batsu Game is about you can't laugh, and if you laugh, you get spanked on the butt with a big paddle. And always at the end of the game, they total up. Who's number one, who's the very least. Tanaka is always the very least because he's not a risk taker. That's kind of a hallmark of the herbivore guy. And so he's a really good example of that if you want to see someone famous. But again, even though he makes those feminine gestures, even though you might think of herbivore guys as feminine, they're not gay. He himself, Tanaka, he's married, and I think honestly that has something to do with him being a famous person, being on TV. Whereas unfortunately, the reality is most herbivore guys, they're not going to get married. So anyway, I didn't really want to talk too much about herbivore guys in this video. I think that we talked about them. We covered them pretty well in the last one. What I want to do is I want to talk about something that's very similar, but different. It's something called Parasite singles. Very, very similar thing, but it's usually more of a female than a male issue. Of course, it could be both. Parasite singles can be men and women, but from my personal experience, and according to, here I'll show you Wikipedia, a parasite single is a single person who lives with their parents beyond their late 20s in order to enjoy a carefree and comfortable life. In Japanese culture, the term is especially used when negatively describing young, unmarried women. So, again, that was the kind of thing that, yeah, I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of women also who just couldn't seem to find a partner. And it was a little bit different than the guys. A little bit. Sometimes very similar. Sometimes what it is they just want to, stay at home, not take risks. They want to, they want to enjoy as it says, a very carefree, comfortable life. I think one of the main differences is the fact that herbivore guys, they don't necessarily live at home with their parents. Parasite singles, that's part of what it means to be a parasite single, is you're living off of somebody else. And that tends to be more of the girls than the guys. But of course, there's plenty of examples of guys doing the same thing. I noticed there were just a lot of examples. There were a lot of students that I taught, ladies, older ladies in their late 30s and 40s, and they weren't married, and they didn't seem to want to be, and they didn't seem unhappy. I think that a lot of the herbivore guys that I taught, I think a lot of them were unhappy. I think that a lot of them really did want to find a girl, want to find a girlfriend, eventually get married. But it was so kind of awkward for them. They just didn't know how to do it. They didn't really know how to, find, a good partner for themselves. A lot of the women, a lot of the Parasite single women, I think comparing the two, they would go into it more open-eyed. It's more of like their own choice. I think what it is really, these days, the level of technology, the level of everything just makes everything so easy. So even if you're working just a regular, typical job, you're going to make enough money to where you can travel every year, you can go wherever you want to, you can do essentially whatever you want to, and you don't have to worry about these big responsibilities. What it says before in the Wikipedia article about a carefree, comfortable life, that's very, very true because one other thing it mentions in the article, and I happen to know this is true, compared to America, if you want to move, in America, typically what you do is you just pay, first and last month's rent, and then a deposit, and then you can move in. So, let's just say you're going for a cheapy little $1,000 apartment. So it'll probably cost you about, $2,500 to move, something like that, something in that ballpark. Japan, no, it's a whole big deal. First of all, you have to pay, oftentimes, yes, first and last month's rent, and then you have to pay something called key money, and you have to pay something called, I forgot which one is which. There's reikin and there's shikikin. And reikin literally means thank you money, which the whole idea is so absurd to the point where many Japanese I know, they also think it's absurd, but they do it. It's a tradition. They don't really not do traditions. If it's a tradition, if it's a hallmark, then they're going to do it. So when they demand that you pay them money as thank you for moving in, honestly, that's kind of a silly idea. Like, why would I pay you? I'm the customer here. Like, shouldn't you pay me something? But that's just the tradition. You pay the reikin and you pay the shikikin, which I think is like a deposit, and that's also about, oftentimes a couple of months' rent. So moving into a cheap little $1,000 apartment, you're going to pay something about $6,000 just to get started in a little apartment, and you're never going to get that back. So, people will often want to just stay with their parents. It's a lot easier. A lot of times the parents like it too. They like the company. They like, the kids there with them. And, a lot of women I know, they really like that kind of carefree, simple life. And of course, most people do want to find, a good husband. They do want to find somebody, but it's just not so urgent for them. And so, they really don't mind staying at home with their parents. And there is one person that I have to tell you a story about. And this person, oh man, I don't even know how to begin with this one. This woman's name is Junko. And Junko was like, she was the one student in all my time teaching English in Japan, the 5 years I was there. She's the one student that I actually went to my boss and said, can I not teach her? Can somebody else take her, because she's just draining my batteries. This is the thing about Junko. She's not like she was like a bad person or a terrible person, but she was probably the single worst student I'd ever taught. Every single thing that she did was wrong, from a teacher student point of view. When you teach for a long time, you get really acclimated with what a good student does and what a bad student does. And if there was like a checklist, every single thing that she did was wrong, including, she would speak Japanese during class, she would, not ask questions, she would respond to every question with like one word. You know, ask her a great big long question. Hey Junko, how was your weekend? And she would say, fine. And he'd say, okay, where did you go this weekend? And she would say, shopping. And that kind of thing, even though you're trying to be friendly and you're trying to, okay, let's pull some more details out here, Junko. She would always just give that bare minimum. And it was worse than that. It was like, it was really like, I wish that I could just like tape it, you know, like it was that perfect. I wish that I could like go back and tape any 5 minute, you know, cross section of a lesson just so I could show somebody how perfectly horrible, you know, everything was about it. You know, like you'd come in, give her a greeting, and she wouldn't say anything, or, you know, the greeting would be, you know, grammatically incorrect, even though you've told her how to say it, you've spent time, you know, every single time to teach her how to say those things, and she still won't take notes. I called her the mule woman. that's how I think of Junko in my mind, is like, you know, she was like a human, but she was kind of like a mule that you were just trying to like pull uphill, and no matter what you were doing, she was always fighting against you. Remember, there was one lesson in particular that stands out to me where the point of the lesson was, I think I was teaching her about resumes. And, you know, the whole point is just like giving her some keywords, some key vocab, right? And I think there was one part in it, and of course she wasn't writing this down. You know, I was writing like all these things on the board. She wasn't writing it down. And I think that I had said, like, okay, typically what happens is you have a section that's like your, you know, your contact information or your objective, and then you have a section that's, you know, your work experience. There's one that's your education, and then like skills or something like that, right? Just giving her those keywords. And I think that like she'd asked me like, where do you put licenses? And I just said, oh, that's under education, you know, like license, certificates. And then she's like, chigal. You know, I was like, I just thought that was so funny. You know, it's like, she was arguing with me, but she wouldn't even argue with me in English. You know, like, so she started going off about, oh no, that's wrong. And she was saying in Japanese, that's wrong because that belongs in this section. And, you know, eventually I was like rolling my eyes. Well, I didn't actually like roll my eyes in front of her, but that's how I was feeling. I was like, you know, this is not resume class. You know, like, you have a job and you're not going to change it. All I'm really doing is I'm trying to give you some key words here. Like, we don't have to write a professional resume for you, you know? But that's kind of like what she was like. You know, like, she would find little points to kind of fight you on when it's like it really doesn't matter. You know, like, what's good is to have a good flowing conversation, and like she wouldn't do that. Now, speaking of her job, and one thing that you also get acclimated with if you're a teacher is the funny but sad truth to it is that the worst student often is a teacher. Those are the worst students because they have this kind of aura about them to where a lot of things that you do just they seem to rub them the wrong way. You know, they seem like they take a lot of things personal, you know? Especially if that person is like an English teacher. She wasn't an English, I think he was like I don't know, maybe a history teacher or something like that. But, you know, she had this air about her like, I'm a teacher, I know what I'm doing, you shouldn't be telling me what to do, you know? Even though she's there to learn. Like, she's there to learn English. And her English was really not that good, so she really did need a lot of help, and you're trying to give her help. But, you know, she's just kind of like fighting you, you know, every step of the way. Now, she was one of these Parasite singles. She was, I think when I met her, she must have been like early 40s, like maybe 44, 45. And I didn't really know too much about like her personal life, but I did know that yeah, she was 45-year-old woman and she lived with her mom. So I don't know how most Americans would react to something like that, you know? Like, would most Americans think that that's a bad thing, or that's just kind of a funny thing, or would look down on her as like, why don't you, have your own life? Like, why don't you go somewhere else? Because it was not that she couldn't afford to. It was that she didn't want to. She was one of the people who was like using her income, to travel and to, go to concerts and, have fun and just do all that stuff. She was an example of that, and I don't know. I think that it led to a certain kind of immaturity, you know. Which is not to say every Parasite single that I met was like that, but she definitely exemplified that. There's there's a whole kind of phenomenon, and of course it's not just women; it's men and women. But there's this whole phenomenon of like these parasite singles and herbivore guys. It's like this whole phenomenon of like what I would describe as like adult children. It it's honestly it's hard to describe exactly because I'm kind of like that. I've got a lot of childish things about myself too, and so I'm not like blaming them, but there were certain kind of things that you would expect an adult would either get over or get past. So this last story I want to tell, it's basically it's just as cute as it is disturbing. The last story I want to tell is not about, not necessarily about parasite singles and herbivore guys, but it's about this family. I taught the mother in the family as part of a group of ladies. Whenever you teach a group of like older ladies, there's a special kind of class they take, which is more based on conversation, and it's kind of advertised that way to them. It's kind of advertised as more fun and inviting, and you know we're not going to get into all that scary grammar. We're just going to talk about like fun things and vacation and family and things like that. So those classes, they were simultaneously very, very easy and very, very hard because the students are coming in not really wanting to challenge themselves so much, but at the same time, any person who takes a class for a long time, and if you feel like you're getting nothing out of it, then you feel like you're kind of wasting your time. So, while there was kind of pressure for teachers um, to teach them and to make it have fun, and not really emphasize like harder things like grammar, be so strict about that. At the same time, you really don't want to just lay off it completely to where they don't progress, they don't improve. So those were sometimes really hard and really easy to teach because sometimes you just go in there, you just chat about their family. Every time you even look at the book, they get kind of nervous, like, oh, we don't want to look at the book, let's just chat. In one of those groups I was teaching, there was this woman, and she had like maybe like a 10 or 11-year-old daughter, and she was married. She was not this parasite single, but anyway, this whole adult children thing. She while on the one hand she was so friendly, and I really liked teaching her. I really had a lot of fun in the class teaching her. She was very, very childish. Um, Especially what I want to say is if you know about Japanese like pop music and culture, then you have definitely heard of the band Arashi. And you've probably definitely heard of the band AKB48. And if you haven't, basically what it is like there are these groups of like they're called talent. They're called talent because they're not specifically one thing. They do acting, singing, dancing, all these things. Maybe you've heard of like SMAP. SMAP is like the same thing, but they're a little bit older now. I think they're somewhere in their 40s. Arashi, they're like the younger, hipper, 20-something-year-old guys, and they have a TV show. They do concerts. Every one of them, and there's like 5 of them. Every one of them does like different movies on their own, and they always get together for these TV shows and these concerts. They are so popular in Japan. They are so popular that you cannot just buy tickets to their concert. If you want to go to their concert, what you have to do is you have to be a member of their fan club, and you have to win a lottery. You have to win a lottery of people who are in the fan club to actually get tickets to their show. Like that's how they cut down to the number that they want, which seems funny to me, but not at all uncommon in Japanese business. I've seen a lot of businesses who would do that. They would kind of artificially put these funny limits on the business that they do, even though they could expand, even though they could get more money. They don't. They put these kind of weird, artificial limits on as much business as they're going to do. I'm going to do this much business exactly in this box, and I'm going to do just that, and that's it. And Arashi was one of those examples. But, they were so widely known. Everybody in Japan knows who Arashi is. So it's this group of, 5 guys, and they're mostly appealing to young teenage girls, right? They're just the same as like any Backstreet Boys or One Direction or whatever group of guys. They're just like that, but the Japanese version. And so they have their own TV show. They do all these things. And that woman who was in that group, she was telling me that oh, I'm really, really excited. And I said, why? She's like, oh, well, I'm going to go to the Arashi concert with my daughter. And I said, okay, oh, your daughter really likes Arashi. Yeah, she really likes them. But I like them too, she was saying. And I was like, oh, really? And I think that it just happened to match the lesson that we were doing. We were doing a lesson on comparatives. So, okay, here's a perfect, chance to ask, who is the bigger fan? Is your daughter a bigger fan, or are you a bigger fan? And then she kind of like looked around and she says, I am a much bigger fan. So here is this woman in her 40s who is admittedly a much bigger fan of Arashi than her daughter. In fact, she was telling me that she would have gone to the concert even if her daughter was sick. Even if her daughter couldn't go. It's more about her going to see, this group of like 20-year-old guys. So that's not quite as disturbing. It just seems to be kind of one of those, harmless, housewife fantasies. Who cares? Let her indulge. But what she was also telling me was that at the same time that she does that, I said, well, would you mind if your husband did the same thing? And she told me, he does. And I said, what? I said, yeah, he goes to the AKB48 concerts. And AKB48, if you don't know, I'm kind of surprised because they're also all over Japan. AKB48 is it's a group of girls, but it's different from Arashi. It's a band of talented ladies, but what happens is that there's a squad of them. I don't know if it's specifically 48 ladies, but there's a whole lot of them, and their fans choose who is going to be, you know, the leads or the captains of the team, so to speak. The ones who typically get their, you know, they're the ones who typically get their pictures on the front covers of magazines or things like that. And, you know, there's something to me that's really subtly disturbing about that culture, because it's this squad of girls who just do this kind of like, you know, really simple kind of dancing and singing. They're not, I wouldn't say any of them are like, you know, really, really talented, you know, especially talented musical superstars on their own. They're just, you know, pretty energetic young girls. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. It's just there's a weird kind of culture to it. Those girls, they cannot have boyfriends. They're not allowed to have boyfriends. If they do, they'll get kicked out. You know, because the whole point is you're supposed to be Japan's girlfriends. You know, all the young men in Japan, they look to you as their, you know, perfect girlfriend. And so you can't actually have your own personal life as far as that's concerned. You know, while you're in the band, you can't have a boyfriend. One girl I know, she was, this was like a couple of years ago, I think I saw this story. One girl had actually had, like a little, I don't know if you want to call it an affair, but she had, I think that she had sex, she was dating, you know, some other guy, some like famous guy, you know, some other like young, talented guy. And I think they were threatening to kick her out. And as an act of, what's the best word? Subservience comes to mind, but not quite like that. As an act of like apology, she shaved her head. You know, this young, beautiful girl, you know, shaved her head as an apology that she had a boyfriend, or that she had, you know, some sexual relation with a young man. That whole thing just, it freaks me out. It's, you know, I don't really understand it, you know. I feel like, why does she have to do that? Like, she's a young person. Like, young people want to meet, you know, other young people. That's kind of what they do, you know. But those were the rules, and she broke the rules, and she made this personal apology by shaving all her head off. Now, going back to that couple, the wife loves to go to Arashi concerts. The husband likes to go to AKB48 concerts. The husband is a high school teacher at a girls' high school. So, you know, I can't say that he's like breaking the law, or like I can't accuse him of doing any wrongdoing, but something about that really kind of like, it kind of trips me out, you know. Anyway, that's basically some of the stories I wanted to share about that. Like I said, Parasite singles in comparison to the boys, I think that most of them, as I said, they're more going into it with their eyes wide open. They're more choosing it. The Herbivore guys, they're I think really that they want to be with somebody, but they really can't help it. They really don't know what to do with themselves. It's hard for them to find a partner. But at the same time, I think it's kind of like, you know, all of Japan's problem, you know. It's the kind of thing where, you know, there's this, you know, alarming trend in like a really low birth rate because the guys and the girls just can't get together. There's different reasons for it, but it kind of contributes to the same problem. So, anyway, that's what I wanted to say about it. That was the story I wanted to tell. Again, any questions, any comments, please let me know down below. Thank you very much. 見てくれてありがとうございます。さようなら。